That is what was he said. And he says, it was an error in judgment, but it was not neglect. This is what Hugh Gavin Thomas would say after the battle about this particular decision. So yeah, the British missed an opportunity that they could have actually turned and engaged. And at 2 a.m., another group of British destroyers will engage Scheer. And at least these 6 destroyers managed to get out 17 torpedoes. So yeah, they were more effective. They would only, hit just one ship, which was the German pre-dreadnought Pommern, or one of the 5-minute ships, as they were called. And she would be the only, you could say, like major battleship class vessel that was sunk. And a lot of officers at that time, lieutenants and all, they were pretty surprised why Jellicoe did not even want to go and engage. And it is after this action with this last destroyer group that Scheer does cross through the minefield. So he allows the battered battle cruisers to move in first, followed by the 5-minute pre-dreadnoughts, and then the rest of the battle fleet goes through. Right. Because it's also at this time that the Lutzow has been scuttled, because she had taken over 8,000 tons of water by now. So no, they knew she's not going to make it back. And then, when the sun also came up and the British were still in pursuit, visibility had even dropped from about 5,000 yards to around 4,000 yards. And then they knew they reached near the minefields, and Jellicoe felt like, the threat from the minefield and ambushing destroyers was too great for him to take. And he would then turn north on the morning of the 1st of June, find survivors from the wrecks of the other ships, bury their dead in the sea, because that is the Royal Navy tradition, and then went home. And that brought an end to the Battle of Jutland. Now, if you were to take stock of casualties and such, the Germans suffered 3,058 casualties. And amongst this, they did lose 1 battle cruiser, the Lutzow, 1 pre-dreadnought, the Pommern, 4 light cruisers, and about 5 to 6 destroyers. This was a total sinking tonnage of about 62,300 tons of ships, which was about 10% of the tonnage that was committed to this entire battle. The British suffered over 6,768 casualties, the loss of 3 battle cruisers, the Queen Mary, my favorite ship, which I just cannot pronounce properly, the Indefatigable, Invincible, 3 cruisers, which included the Black Prince, and 8 destroyers. In terms of shipping tonnage, that was about 113,000 tons of ships that was sunk, which represented 9% of the committed tonnage to this battle. Now, it was ultimately still the only decisive engagement was with the battle cruisers. Now, when they came back, there's going to be a big war about discussion about this battle. You could really say that Scheer, Jellicoe, and Beatty, none of these particular admirals won anything. It was really Hipper, you could say, that was really a victor, right? Because he engaged Beatty with an inferior force and, did inflict massive casualties. But you could see while it was you could call it a tactical German victory at best, it is still a strategic loss for them, because the German high seas fleet is never going to come back. Even though they did not lose as many ships, the capital ships took a beating from the British. And they're going to be confined to the dry docks for many, many months. So the effective combat strength of the German high seas fleet has gone down. Whereas with the British, when they limped back to their ports, all the ships that were damaged or lost were pretty much already having same caliber replacements already waiting to just step in. So within a week or so after Jutland, the British strength is practically the same, even if you account for the ships that are going on to the dry dock for repairs. This is just like that industrial power of Britain that Germany could just never match.
Yeah,
And by the end
we
of the
also
war,
have to keep in mind that the Germans needed a victory. The British, they are totally fine, essentially, with a tie. They are in control right now. The
I
Germans,
wouldn't,
on the other hand, they have a problem.
true, but the British, like, they expected a victory because that was like Royal Navy tradition, right? Because nothing except a big victory is going to do. Even though strategically they definitely could afford the loss, as you rightly said. But there was going to be a war of words. And, in the aftermath, like BT and Jellicoe would exchange a lot of sharp words. And a lot of the early blame went on to Jellicoe. One of the primary reasons was, BT had been having operational command for battles before Jutland, and he had a better PR image and media friends. So it's kind of easy to blame Jellicoe because let's not forget, BT lost two battle cruisers on his own against a numerically inferior foe. It's not like Jellicoe lost anything major or to that same scale, right? But BT said that Jellicoe robbed him of victory by caution. And I'm like, dude, you got beaten up pretty badly by some outgunned battle cruisers. What victory are you going to be talking about? Now, Jellicoe was blamed for his predominantly two um, decisions, which was not to, go through the minefields, and when that mass torpedo attack took place, for turning away from the torpedoes and not into the torpedoes. But there were like also some shortcomings that had to be addressed and would finally be addressed. One is the battlecruiser philosophy. The idea of the battlecruiser is it should be fast enough to catch any cruiser or be a scout ship, but also has the firepower to technically take on a larger capital ship. And one of its most prized assets is the speed. Now, the Germans, Simon, as you did point out, they did not sacrifice armor. They sacrificed firepower, which is why the German battlecruiser shells and guns were much smaller in caliber for the weight savings. And I think this is a good example is the Derfflinger, which was one of the German battle cruisers of Hipper. It had the same belt armor as the British dreadnought flagship of Jellicoe, the Iron Duke. Now that really puts things into perspective. And at the same time, the British went for bigger guns because their training doctrine really focused a lot on volume of fire. So one of the reasons that's important is if you have to focus on the volume of fire, they have to obviously get shells, ammo, powder up to the turrets quite quickly from the magazine below. And one of the easiest ways to go is to cut out the safety features. So the fire door, which saved the Lutza, like the Derfflinger, sorry, that was completely removed from the British battle cruisers. So Simon, it was to your point, right? Like the Germans addressed that issue. The British did not address this particular safety issue. And the British also had a problem with their armor-piercing shells. A bulk of the British AP shells would actually explode on impact, when such ships are supposed to have actually a delayed impact so that the momentum allows the shell to penetrate a bit deeper and then explode. So it's kind of like why the shells were not able to really penetrate the turrets of the German battle cruisers as well. All of these would definitely be, addressed during the course of the war, finally, because I think they learned it the hard way. But this was pretty much the battle of the battle cruisers, because the battle cruiser had its day. Yeah, we know the British are still going to try to use them and gonna have spectacular results in World War II. But barring this, every navy in the world would be moving towards fully fast, armored, heavy-hitting battleships that would in tonnage be exceeding 38,000, 40,000 knots, or in the Japanese case, doubling that to 75,000.
Because when you
But
don't have much resources, make everything as big as possible.
yeah, but that does bring me to the end of the Battle of Jutland. Kind of anticlimactic from when it felt like, the big fleets came together, and the German Navy would never sortie out again for the rest of the war. It
Well,
would be the submarine force that would be going, but the surface force is it's practically finished its course of action in the war.
well, they did actually try once again at the very end of the
Oh,
war, but that was not a good idea because, well, that caused the November Revolution in Germany, which ultimately led to the abdication of the emperor.
Yep.
but I think while we do finish this battle, and there's definitely, I think, Greg, will definitely be covering the submarine warfare of Germany in some future episodes.
Yeah, sure.
I think we could definitely talk about maybe one of the more, I mean, I really find that as an amazing thing, is the scuttling of the German fleet at Scapa Flow.
Sure. Before I jump into the scuttling, I'll just mention the Kiel Mutiny because I don't know, they go hand in hand, I find. So, like you mentioned, after the Battle of Jutland, the German Admiralty basically didn't want to risk their capital ships anymore, kept them at anchor. A lot of the officers were transferred to the U-boats, obviously, that were going out, and to very small vessels that could still potentially raid because they didn't stop small raids. Like, there's always going to be small raiding efforts. But as we all know, in World War One, things get much worse every year for Germany. The rations are going to get really bad, and the sailors up until this point enjoyed decent rations. After this point, it gets kind of bad, and that alongside being demoralized and I guess you could say feeling cheated of a chance at victory, the German sailors are not happy. And there's also some political things going on. There's actually this political party, the anti-war Independent Social Democratic Party, and they're kind of, to brutally summarize, not treating the sailors very well at this point. And this leads to a lot of conflicts. There's petty grievances that lead to things like on the SMS Prinz Regent Leopold, 49 crew disembark without permission at Wilhelmshaven to just go watch a movie, and the movie gets canceled. And like, there's a whole problem with that, and 11 guys they end up getting arrested. So 600 other crew members they try to come ashore to in support of their comrades. It leads to more arrests. Two guys get executed because it's seen as kind of like a potential mutiny. A lot of people are arrested afterwards, but that's just kind of the feeling of the time. After the 100 Days offensive, things are getting a lot worse for Germany.